Welcome back to HQ Spotlight. When it comes to the NFC South, no question who has dominated it to this point. The Tampa Bay Bucs have won 4 straight titles, but it was a race to the finish line to claim the most recent. Now the South stepping up this offseason. Their biggest challenger could be in Atlanta, where the Michael Penix era is off and running. However, new head coach in New Orleans and Kellen Moore has a lot of questions to answer. And what about Bryce Young, who was benched last year in favor of Andy Dalton? Lots to talk about ahead of training camp. So let's do it with our NFL experts. We've got the freshly married Mike Renner joining us fresh off of an exciting honeymoon. And we've also got our 2-time Super Bowl champ in Bryant McFadden. Gentlemen, appreciate the time. Let's start the conversation with the Tampa Bay Bucs, the defending champions. They managed to claim the division last year with a 10-7 record. But they're the early favorite to repeat here. There's a lot of questions. I feel like we can go in different directions. So Mike, I'll leave it open here. What questions do you have?
I want to know how this wide receiver room shakes out, because they have about as much talent as anyone in the NFL, but their 1 and 2 are getting up there. Mike Evans on the wrong side of 30 now. Chris Godwin almost 30, but also coming off a gruesome ankle injury that we saw down the stretch there last season. And they just drafted a guy in the first round by the name of Emeka Egbuka, who's a NFL-ready wide receiver. They had 2 guys who impressed last year in Trey Palmer and Jalen McMillan, who are young, up-and-coming type of wide receivers. So there's a lot of talent on this roster right now. I'm just excited to see how it shakes out. Obviously, with Baker Mayfield at the helm, it's going to be one of the most explosive offenses in the NFL, and this is a good problem to have, but it's going to be very important to see who the 1, 2, 3 are for this Bucs team.
Yeah, Mike, I'm right there with you. I think, of course, you know who 1 and 2 is, but in terms of number 3, it's up for grabs, especially when you look at how good Jalen McMillan played a year ago. I mean, surprisingly good considering the injuries that led to opportunities for him, and he cashed in. I mean, one of 2 rookies in NFL history with 50-plus receiving yards and a touchdown in 5 consecutive games. He's in the history book with his rookie campaign, but you talked about the first-round selection and kind of what was a surprise for many and taking Emeka. I mean, one would think he would jump into the lineup, but who knows? Jalen McMillan is a guy that really earned the trust of his starting quarterback in Baker Mayfield. So having depth there is definitely a very, very important thing, because they lack depth in that area. But just seeing how that number 3 position is going to work out is going to be very, very entertaining throughout training camp.
It's interesting, too. Both of you guys mentioned Baker Mayfield. When we did this exercise a little bit earlier in the offseason, it seemed like there were some questions surrounding Baker and what kind of year he would have, because he's been, you know, a 2-time All-Pro out in Tampa Bay since joining the Bucs. So obviously a lot of questions there as well. But if he's got some good guys to throw to, it seems like it's going to be a good situation out there. Don't know if I can say the same for the Panthers, gentlemen. We know that Baker lost an offensive coordinator who is now the head coach out there in Carolina, and Dave Canales. He had to bench Bryce Young last year. We saw it. But B-Mac, they've got some new playmakers on offense that could excite Panthers fan, but you're actually questioning the defense in 2025.
No question, because that was an area of concern a year ago, especially with the injuries. I had the luxury of talking to a star cornerback, J.C. Horn, and he was just raving about the defensive line, especially having a healthy Derrick Brown into the fold. And then you bring in Tershawn Wharton as well. They should be a formidable force in the interior, but who's going to provide the edge rushing production, right? You look at those numbers. If you're not putting pressure on opposing quarterbacks or sacking quarterbacks, you're going to lose a lot of ball games, and the numbers prove that to be correctly. So will it be DJ Wanham, who only had 4 sacks? I mean, this was a team a year ago, Mike. No one had 6 sacks on the entire defensive roster. So who will provide the edge rushing? Will it be Nick Scorton, who they drafted from A&M? They need someone to step up, because inside, Derrick Brown is going to account for 2 blockers. Other people have to step up to the plate and make sure they not only hit singles, but every now and then they got to bring in some home runs as well. So that's what I'm looking to see unfold throughout training camp with the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, I agree with you, B-Mac. I do think this defense needs to step their game up. What we saw from last year wasn't good enough, but also the talent just wasn't good enough last year.
Yeah.
Where I'm looking at, I'm staying at the same position I was looking at with the Bucs. It's this receiver room, because they've gone 3 straight years now of investing a top 40 pick in the wide receiver position. Jonathan Mingo, Xavier Legette, and now Tetairoa McMillan. Obviously, Jonathan Mingo, they traded at the deadline last year. He's not there anymore. Xavier Legette had a bit of a disappointing rookie season compared to a lot of the rookies balling around the NFL. But Tetairoa McMillan, he's a different animal to me. So are these 2 first-rounders they had the last 2 seasons, 2 physical mismatch type of guys? Are they ready to be that number 1 and number 2 that Bryce Young needs? Because there were flashes down the stretch last year. That Eagles game where they should have won that, had Xavier Legette caught that pass at the end. Bryce Young looked like a surefire stud of a franchise quarterback that a lot of people thought he was going to be when he went number 1 overall. He just needs the help around him now.
So to that point, let's say, and I don't want to put out any bad juju or anything, but let's say that the wide receiver room doesn't work out the way that we expect it to. What does that mean for Bryce Young?
It means he's going to be handing the ball off a lot. I mean, they have a good running game there. They have a good offensive line there. It just might mean that they are third fiddle in this division, still behind the Falcons, behind the Saints.
All right, well, let's talk.
Bucks.
Yeah, the Bucks. We're going to talk about the Saints in a minute, but let's go to the Falcons, another team where both of you guys are kind of looking at the defense here. We saw Atlanta finish in the bottom 5 in terms of sacks, BMAC, so we were talking about that with Carolina. The Falcons not much better. But Renner, when you look at the draft, they tried to address it, right? They picked up Jalen Walker and James Pierce Jr. I'm just curious, though, as you look at this list, is that enough to help the Falcons get over the hump?
I think it's enough to improve from last season because obviously they were one of the worst in the NFL last season. Over the past decade, they've been dead last in the NFL in sacks. And their best pass rusher last year was an off-ball linebacker in Caden Ellen. They lost Grady Jarrett from the interior, a stalwart, but he obviously wasn't the Grady Jarrett of old. But I'm looking forward to what Raheem Morris does with this duo because they may not be polished, immediate pass rushers like Jared Verse was last year for the Rams, but what they are freak athletes. James Pierce ran sub 4.5 at the combine. Jalen Walker, if he would have tested, would have been in a similar range. These guys can get home on stunts, on slants. They can create havoc with their athleticism. And Raheem Morris, when he kind of had to cobble together his last year in LA with a lot of young guys, what he did was put him in a position to just utilize that athleticism. So I think they'll be much more effective, even if they're not necessarily day one impact sort of edge rushers.
Yeah, I have some numbers to back everything that Mike hit on in terms of production sacking quarterbacks, right? In 2024, they were 31st in the National Football League, 31 sacks. 2023, Mike, a great year for Atlanta. They finished ranked 21st in the National Football League, 42 sacks. But in 2022, they were 31st again, ranked 21 sacks. In 2021, they were dead last. They had 18 sacks. 18 sacks. So now when you look at Terry Fontenot and just being overly aggressive and trading back into the first round to go get a pass rush, he understands what has been the issue for this defense. They brought in veteran Leonard Floyd. You talked about Jalen Walker, James Pierce. Somebody has to step up and say, I identify myself as a sack master for this defense because they haven't had that luxury since, Vic Beasley years ago when he had 16 sacks, and that was just an outlier type of year for him as an individual, and the same can be said for the organization. And we talked about how bad Carolina has been in sacking the quarterbacks. Get this, Atlanta, they've been worse. And that's why this is very, very important for one of those first rounders along with Leonard Floyd to show up and say, you know what, I can be a guy that can consistently get home because in the secondary we have a saying, coach, make it hot so we can squat. If you're not making it hot on these quarterbacks, we can't squat on any routes.
Someone just give BMAC some sacks, please. That's all we're asking for coming up in training camp here in the NFC South. All right, guys, so we want sacks from some of these teams. We want wide receiver production from the others. There's so many questions when it comes to the Saints, right? You could take this in so many different directions. There's health concerns, roster concerns, coaching concerns. But the biggest, BMAC, and for you as well, Mike, is the quarterback situation. I feel like there's 7 questions within that question there. What's the biggest that stands out to you when it comes to the quarterbacks in New Orleans?
Yeah, which quarterback will emerge to be more consistent and make routine plays happen routine? When you look at Tyler Shough, when you look at Spencer Rattler, one of these two guys, I believe, will find a way to win this job. And it's very, very important because whoever wins this job, now the next question, Mike, will be, will they be able to sustain a level of production to remain the starting quarterback? And this is an issue for Kellen Moore throughout the entire organization because if you don't have a quarterback, the football field, it feels like it's 150 yards. It's not 100 yards. It's 150 when you don't have good quarterback play. And that is the biggest conundrum when you look at the New Orleans Saints is who will emerge to be the starting quarterback out of camp and can they sustain the level of play to stay in that position?
Yeah, I think it's just who doesn't lose them games because this is still a good roster. I mean, this might be the best run-blocking offensive line in the NFL outside of the Philadelphia Eagles. They still have a lot of talent defensively. They have 2 speedsters at wide receiver that can stretch the football field. There's a lot to like. It's a good situation for whoever wins the job, but just from what we saw last year after Derek Carr went down, neither of those guys are ready to play in the NFL. So whether it's Shea Kaner, whether it's Spencer Rattler, whether it's second-rounder Tyler Shough, who can just not lose them games, keep this offense on schedule, that's what the Saints need.
They're going to need, I think, some thoughts and prayers as well. 5-12 last year, and our Sportsline model not projecting very many more wins in 25. Either way, guys, sit tight. We're going to hang out with you guys in just a few minutes. Before we do so, take a look here at the odds to win the NFC South. No surprise, the Saints have the fourth shortest odds there, but the Bucs trying to run it back for a fifth consecutive season at plus 100.